In this video, I'm going to talk about exactly how to mix up your iron, potassium, your calcium if you need it, and what to use. I'm also going to explain to you in this video that if you're one of those people who like to add very clean water to your aquarium and you don't have the availability for a reverse osmosis, I'm going to show you something that will solve your problem. Instead of using reverse osmosis, how you can turn your water into zero dissolved solids. In other words, it's been tested to bring your water down to zero, so all the solids are out of it. And that's coming up next in this video, so stay tuned. Okay, everybody, this is Dr. Novak again. What we're going to talk about is right here. This is my top-off container. And in this top-off container is basically, I did a review on the pump that's in there, the Tunzi pump and everything else. But basically, this is a 5-gallon top-off container. So I am going to explain to you, which has been asked to me several times, how much of a particular fertilizer should I be using and everything else. Now, I just watched a YouTube channel talks about I got rid of my algae problems after I did this. And basically, he's talking about lean fertilization, which I've talked about years and years and years ago. Some people are very adamant about certain things, and I've tried to explain to you that lean fertilization is better than overdosing your aquariums. And I will leave a link to the video, so if you want to watch it, he talks about how now he's lean fertilizing his aquariums to make sure he doesn't get the algae problems. And he said this is something new that people are doing. Well, it's not exactly new because I talked about this years ago in videos, lean fertilization, and not using as much CO2 as been advocated. Now, some people, one person made a Takashi Amano. Here's one of his books right here, Takashi Amano. In his books, he advocates 30 parts per million of CO2, and one person said, oh, he's a god. Well, Takashi Amano passed away, so he's not a god. Okay, gods don't die. He's just a person, and he's just giving you what he's tried, and he's only telling you 30 parts per million. That's an optimum. If you want your plants to grow very quickly and very fast, optimum. I've been explaining to you that you can burn plants out even quicker by doing that. There's no reason to put 30 parts per million of CO2 in an aquarium. You don't really need to go that high. You can be using CO2, like you see my CO2 tank there in the back, and I've had that going now for 8 months. So if you don't try to push your CO2 limits in an aquarium, it will last a long time. Next thing of it is you can use a controller. So if you have very high alkaline water, very hard water, controller can bring your pH down to, let's say, 7.0 if you want it, 6.8, 6.6, 6.5. It will control the CO2 that goes into your aquarium and keep your pH very stable at what it's been set at. All right. That's why you buy a controller. Remember I did the video on the controller that does pH and ORP. But with this video, we are going to talk about lean dosing. And this is something I talked before, but I get many questions still of it. How much do you use? Now, I'm going to give you what I do for 5 gallons. You convert it back down to 1 gallon. If you want to make yourself up some of this solution, you're going to make it out of a gallon jug, I suggest you buy distilled water and you make it from distilled water. But for those of you out there that say, well, I use reverse osmosis, or my water isn't very clean, what can I do? Okay, there is a trick. And that trick is something like this. This is right here, zero water. I'll leave a link down below, and it will do comparisons with these water pitchers. And it will compare that zero water with other very expensive devices out there to clean drinking water. Okay, even one device he has is almost like a reverse osmosis, costs over $400. But the zero water produced water comparable or even at times better than what the $400 reverse osmosis system had that was partable. Now, a lot of people say I can't use reverse osmosis because it's too expensive. You use 2 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of water. Well, that is one way of making water. You literally, and they sell these filters like this in a cartridge. Okay, and you can buy these, and I can show you exactly when these get used up, how you can open them and actually repack them. That's right, you can actually repack them. I think a cartridge like that, I'm just guessing, costs 20 or 30 bucks. But I mean, you can repack one of those for about, I'm going to say, $5. Yeah, I'll say $5 or less. So what you can do is you can take one of these filters and literally put it in, let's say, a 5-gallon bucket, cut a hole, make sure it's tight, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, and then you can have like a 33-gallon Rubbermaid container, which a lot of people use. And you put this in a 5-gallon bucket. You'll cut a hole that this will fit in, this filter. I'm not going to open it because this is a brand new filter. And then when you pour water into that 5-gallon bucket, let's say 5 gallons, it will purify that water and put it in a 33-gallon, Rubbermaid container for you, clean, and it'll be zero. If you put a TDS meter onto it, it will read 0. So you can actually make this in the 5-gallon bucket. All you need is a couple pieces of wood, put the bucket on top, and fill up the bucket full of water. Let it run through this filter, and then when the 5-gallon bucket empties, just pour 5 more gallons in. So every time you could be making it that way. You can have automatic top off for the 5-gallon bucket. There's all kinds of ways to do it to pay less than wasting 2 gallons to make 1 gallon of water. This is one way of doing it, is using one of these, and then you will use gallon per gallon of water. So if you have a 5-gallon bucket, this will make 5 gallons. I think these are good up to, if I'm not mistaken, 1,500 gallons. I know they last for quite a long time. So you can make quite a lot of clean water off of one of those filters. But I will leave a link so you can watch the video on how they tested out several different of these partible water cleaners to clean your water, drinking water. This one, the zero, was right on top. There is a way to go around it, and you can repack it. What it's packed with basically is this. This is food grade resin. And I had this on one of my videos that you can buy off the internet. This is food grade now. And this is what they use in Dick Boyd's ChemiPure. They use a resin. And resin picks up quite a lot of impurities out of the water and can knock it down completely to zero. But if you're using like Dick Boyd's or a product like Dick Boyd's, the problem that becomes prevalent is your KH may drop. And your KH is based off of calcium. And because Dicboids uses resin. Resin can take and drop your KH. A lot of people say, my KH is real low. What's wrong with it? And usually I ask, sometimes it boils down to, well, what kind of carbon are you using? Oh, I only use the best. I only use Dicboids. Well, a lot of these Dicboids has that resin in it, food grade resins. So you definitely want to then maybe add calcium back into your aquarium. This right here comes in handy for doing such a thing. It's an automatic top off. So in my aquarium, as I've explained in my other videos, and I will now explain to you here, you do the conversion. This is 5 gallons of water, and you can use your test kits to find out, are you adding enough calcium to that water or iron to the water? But what's happening is people are overdosing. And remember I told you about just grabbing a squirt bottle like this, putting your chemicals together like in a gallon of distilled water, and then refilling this, and then when you go to feed your fish, you just spray it every time you feed your fish into the aquarium. And every single day you are going to be spraying in a little bit of your potassium, your calcium, your iron, whatever is needed. Every day you'll be inoculating the aquarium with it without just getting a pump and pumping it in to the aquarium and overdosing your aquarium and causing algae problems. And one of the big algae problems you're going to notice is beard algae and stuff like that you're going to start getting because you're overdosing with nutrients that the plants can't use. Now, if you're going to overdose, a lot of people then have to bring up their CO2 to peak of 30 parts per million of CO2, like Amano explains, okay? Like he explains, because you are putting so much in there, the plants have to use it. That would explain it. But even then, people are realizing they don't need as much as they thought. They've been overdosing. And a lot of complaints, if you watch the video, was I followed the directions, I did exactly what the manufacturer said, and I overdosed the whole system. Constantly, I was overdosing. So, what I have found out, and this is what I like to use, is I use an automatic top off for this aquarium. As you notice something with this aquarium, if you look right down there, right there, is a pump. Now that pump is right here. I think you say this Regugu, and it's a wave maker. This particular pump here, bought off the internet, of course, 21 bucks. It's white. I can see where a lot of people wouldn't want white because it's in my sump. I don't care. This pump's about 1,200 gallons an hour. 21 bucks. It's very well made. It is. It's a nice pump, Chinese-made pump. It does the trick, and I like it because it keeps things in here stirred up constantly. So what I do is you grab potassium. I show this in another video, and I put 1 potassium tablet per gallon. It's 5 gallons, it's 5 tablets. The next thing I do is determine my calcium. Now, there's 2 ways of putting calcium in an aquarium. One is you can use calcium tablets. If it's for human consumption, believe me, it'll be safe for your aquarium. Don't worry about it. Another way of using calcium, though, which I have used and I did seminars on years ago, back in the 80s, I did seminars on this, was to use a little trick called chalk. Chalk is pure calcium carbonate. That's what they make chalk out of, pure calcium carbonate, okay? It's the purest calcium carbonate you can get in the world. And that's what chalk is. And you just take a piece of chalk. Of course, it has a binder to it. Here's a piece of chalk. And for 5 gallons of water, you can put the piece of chalk directly in there. Now, because the pump is so strong, it's going to constantly move the chalk around and help the chalk disintegrate. The chalk is designed for because I have very low total alkalinity. Now my hardness is great, but my total alkalinity is very low in this aquarium. So you add a piece of chalk and have it stirred around, keep stirring it around, it will dissolve and you'll get that calcium carbonate back into the system for next to nothing. Box of chalk like this costs you $1. Okay? Maybe, you know. So, but if you're put it in something, like you can already see how fast the chalk is dissolving down there. Look at how small it is already. If you have it with a pump, let's say you want to make 5 gallons of this, just like I make, you put a piece of chalk in there. I use this in saltwater aquariums. In fact, this is true. I had trinactal clams, and I bought them at about 2 inches, and within a year, they were already about 7 inches big. You can hold a trinactal clam in your hand. Only thing I ever added that aquarium was calcium carbonate. Okay, didn't use all the fancy stuff they use today. It was just pure calcium carbonate. Put high amounts of calcium back into my saltwater aquarium, which is used for the shells and stuff of snails and invertebrates and stuff. It worked for my trinactal clams, and they very thick shell. So they grew using just me dosing in or putting in chalk into my saltwater aquariums. Anyhow, so potassium. Potassium usually comes in 250 capsules. It's very cheap, 99 milligrams. You put 1 capsule of this in per gallon of water, and that will add your potassium. Next thing you want to do, and what I do inside here, this is 5 gallons of water. You do the conversion if you are using only 1 gallon. If you are mixing it with 5 gallons, that is something else. But I like to have a very strong pump because it keeps the baking soda. I put 1 tablespoon of baking soda in this 5 gallons of water to help stabilize my pH, because I have found out that with all that substrate, the fluval substrate I'm using, it does lower your pH. By doing this, I'm able to stabilize my pH. As you see it on videos, the 6.7, 6.8, 6.86, you know, it becomes very stable. So I use a tablespoon of baking soda to put that in here, and that pump helps keep circulating it and keeps everything stirred up constantly. So whenever the pump does turn on, it will put into the aquarium what I need automatically. But for you, you're going to make one of these out of a gallon of distilled water or whatever you're going to do. But you have to make sure you blend up everything real good. You may have to use a blender, put some distilled water in a blender, add these ingredients, which I'm talking about. If you're doing 5 gallons, you're going to cut back on them. And then the next thing is iron. This is what I use. This is for ponds. This is very strong. And on something like this, I may put, for 5 gallons of water, I may only put a capful of this inside 5 gallons of water. Okay. Just so you get some iron back in the aquarium. Plus, I have laterite. That's going to help. Just a little bit of iron. If you watch that video that I give the link below, the guy will talk about how he has done things. Iron should not go above 1 part per million. It should be 1 part per million or lower. Even 0.5 part per million is high enough when it comes to iron. Iron is very essential. One thing the guy says on the video, if you watch it, first thing he says is nitrates. Cut back on the nitrates. I constantly have people telling me about plants need nitrates. Well, if you watch this guy with the lean fertilizers, one thing he says is a bad choice is nitrates. Well, if you've been watching my videos, another thing you have learned very, very importantly is phosphates. You have to definitely make sure your phosphates are very low. Next complaint I have is I'm getting this spot algae, or I may get a little hair algae. I don't like the spot algae. You know, I try to explain to people, spot algae is going to attack anubias plant leaves. It may attack other things, but basically you're going to see it on anubias plant leaf, spot algae, okay? Don't worry about it. Algae is part of a system. If a system is running correctly, you are going to have some algae. You're not going to have a pristine tank, an immaculate tank, without having some algae. Algae also uses elements that could cause problems too. Spot algae is the yin and the yang of keeping other algae at bay. Spot algae can live very decently with very low phosphate levels, but don't get anal about it. All tanks have algae. You just don't want algae taking over the aquarium and ruling your life and destroying your aquarium. Algae you're going to have to deal with. It's part of the hobby. Even with high redox of 375 or 400, you still are going to have algae. And you have to understand, redox tells you how much oxidizers you have or how clean your tank is, and people get that mistakenly for turbidity of the aquarium. No, that's only how it looks. Look at it this way. Here, I'll explain it easy. In the wild, if any of you get to South America and you get to go to some of these rivers and stuff, Rio de Janeiro or some of these places you can go, and you will find out a lot of these rivers constantly have water flowing through them, right? Okay. Yet the turbidity of the water, you can barely see anything in the water. It's all brown. That doesn't mean the redox isn't high. The redox is high because the water is constantly flowing in those rivers. That's just silt and stuff in the water that turns its turbidity brown. A lot of discus are found in murky waters and not pure clean water, but that is because the water has a very high redox, but the turbidity is very high also. That's why you can't see very well in the water. But the water is constantly being exchanged 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. In our aquariums, we can't quite change the water. So what we're trying to do is obtain a high redox value, so that will tell us our oxidation potential or how clean your tank is or how well everything's doing. And it will also help oxidizers so you don't pollute your aquarium. So that's why you see when I've done videos and showed you discus, my discus, other people's discus, how they're spawning and taken care of. That's the reason why. Because the turbidity of the water may be a color from wood or even putting too much iron in or iron, but the redox is very high only because the oxidation potential of that water is extremely high. So any organic matter that starts breaking down is easily taken care of. That is what we want. That's what these videos have been about. So the chalk is going to tell me exactly if my KH is going to raise. Now, if I see it's dosing, be patient. Nothing's going to happen overnight. This is the problem. People think that if I put this stuff in overnight, everything's going to be fixed. No, everything should take gradual. 2-3 days, check it. If your KH isn't up, you may have to add more chalk. Another piece of chalk. Make sure the water inside your container is constantly moving, because that will help the chalk break down into its finest particles. So when it does come in an aquarium, you're not blowing all kinds of white stuff all over your aquarium and waiting a long time for that to dissolve. So this is the reason I put a high-powered pump in here, is to keep the water moving so it eventually breaks down everything in there very slowly and helps break down the baking soda that I put in there to help raise the pH. And this is the reason I do this. If you're going to make it up, you may want to take some of your distilled water, put it in a blender, then add what you want in the blender and blend it real good. And then mix yourself up a nice batch of your trace elements and iron and things like that you're going to be putting back in the aquarium. Then every day you can spray, and that will be determined whether you spray once or twice a day, but not much is going to come out of a sprayer like this, so you don't overdo it. That way these elements can be used up and you're just giving enough to keep your plants going. They don't need to be saturated with any of these elements. There just needs to be enough in there so they can utilize them so they don't have starvation. A lot of people. There is one note I'm going to add here at the very end of this, and that is that once a month I will empty that 5-gallon container that refills the aquarium, clean it out, fill it back up with clean water, and then re-add new chalk and everything to it. So it always stays clean. It's not a big hassle. I do that. I just wanted to make a note of that because I know people are going to say, well, how often do you do this or that? So about once a month, 12 times a year, I just will empty that out, and then I'll put new baking soda in it and chalk and anything else that I need to add to the container, iron, everything else. In that month, though, I may have to add another capful of iron once a week, or maybe once every 2 weeks. I'll add 1 capful of iron to that container. And like I said, at the end of the month, I empty it and restart it all over again. So anyhow, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I've gotten some new stuff in, which I'll do my next video for you. So stay tuned to that, and happy fish keeping.